You're listening to the Executive Coach Podcast with me, Maya Goodker, and welcome to the Career Reboot series. This month, you'll be waking up to a daily curated series of episodes to listen to with your morning coffee. Your go-to guides to keeping you motivated, strategic, and able to have fun in your career, especially as some of us might be limping a little bit towards the summer holidays. And as you listen in this month, you might find it useful to have my Career Blindspots scorecard to hand, which you can download from the link in the show notes. So let's dive into today's episode. So today we are going to be exploring another question. This was one that came up in last week's masterclass, and I thought it was a great question and one that I didn't necessarily have the time to explore as fully during that masterclass. So I wanted to set it out here. And the question was around lateral career moves. So in a space where we're thinking about how to grow and develop our careers, what are lateral moves and how do they fit in with this? And are they okay? And how should we approach them? Right. So I've got 3 ways to start thinking about lateral moves if it's something that is very much on your radar. I'm a big fan personally of lateral moves. I think they inject fun. They allow us to experiment a bit more, discover different aspects of work that we enjoy. And they also bring a huge number of benefits if they are done well. So 3 things to think about when you are pondering a lateral move. And the first one is almost a kind of a bigger question if you are doubting whether to make a lateral move. And that bigger question is, what is your bigger vision? Right. So I want to be doing that life work 10-year vision, really fleshing that out with you and challenging it, making sure it's exciting enough, making sure it's kind of hard enough to understand the steps, but still within the realms of possibility. And once we really have that, it becomes a lot clearer how the lateral moves might fit in. For example, it may well be that you do want to shoot for some of those super chunky roles, CEO, board level roles, C-suite. And at that level, you really need to be able to demonstrate that breadth of business experience. And in that instance, rising up straight vertically is actually going to be a disadvantage. And as you then want to be positioning yourself for some of those roles, you're going to be asked to demonstrate some breadth, maybe go away and do a secondment or something like that. So why not determine that of your own and have some fun with it and get some lateral moves in at certain choice points in your career. There's some, I think, really good levels at which it becomes quite cool and a little bit easier maybe to move around. So a managerial level can be one because it requires a certain type of skill with management and leadership, which can be transferred around easily. I guess what could get tricky is if you've gone too high up a vertical and then you've become incredibly specialized, or there aren't actually that many parallel roles across the organization at that level. So it becomes there are fewer options to choose from. So I guess you want to be in a place where there are lots of different options at your lateral level for you to be able to consider and experiment with. So that would be one example of how it could work really well in your career. Another example is if we've done that life work vision and we actually identify the rare and valuable skills that you need to accumulate in order to advance towards that vision. And we realize that there are certain relationships, certain projects, certain experiences that you're going to have access to inside your current organization that would actually be harder to access if you moved outside your organization, for example. So when I talk about lateral here, I'm talking about internal lateral moves, I guess, just to clarify. But then you've got an incredible opportunity because you have a lot of the good business knowledge that comes from being inside your business. You have a certain skill level and you're able to get some really different experiences under your belt using the collateral of having that business experience of your organization. And you may struggle at your level to get that kind of experience off the bat outside, right? So if you're trying to completely career transition into some other space, they may want to see evidence of that before they hire you in an external context, whereas internally you may be able to do some quite exciting things. So these are some lovely examples and ways in which lateral moves can be super duper and really great for building that longer term career path. I certainly benefited from doing a lot of lateral moves at manager level. It definitely did feel like there was one part of me that thought, oh, am I going sideways? Am I going too slow here? Whilst I had peers who stayed in the same team and I could see were ready then for that next level inside their team. And so my promotion could have perhaps come quicker if I'd stayed within one team. So in the short term, it might have felt like I was going a little bit slower. Yet longer term, because it was done intentionally and because I was lucky enough to have a coach from the tender age of about 26, there was some strategy behind it. So it worked. So those are some examples of how lateral moves can be massively beneficial to your career, even if in the short term you might feel like you're not accelerating at the pace that maybe others are, or that you feel you should, or that you have in the past. So that's number one. Number two is, now as you think about trying to make a case and move into another team, I would love for you not only to maintain your grade, which is a cool thing that you get to do if you stay inside your organization and yet are making that switch, right? If you wanted to step into a different industry or a different kind of business function externally, you may struggle, right? As we've described, but internally you get to maintain that grade. So this is super cool. And I want to actually push us to say, let's also shoot for a little bit of a pay rise in that process, right? Because there's a vacancy being being opened. If they were hiring externally, they would be facing significant costs. So there is a little bit of money to play with there. And as I also talked about in my masterclass, we are going to be building up, if we were working together, we would be building up your social capital, your ability to make a case and have that strong internal and external influence. So as you build that stuff up, you start to put yourself in a position where you can actually negotiate for that pay rise. Because obviously, even if it's not as significant as you going for a promotion at that time, that, once you've locked that in, that's recurring annually, right? So I do see there being an opportunity for that. The way of doing this is to start thinking not about what you don't know about the other department and the content and the technical aspects that you will just be less familiar with naturally, but actually start thinking what gaps they have and potential they have in their team that you, with a completely different set of experience, can come in and really help elevate them as a team. So my example was that I wanted to move out from economics consulting into corporate social responsibility. I was at KPMG. They were doing super cool things in that space, in the local communities and with local schools. And I really wanted to give that a go. But there were people in that team who had basically risen up through all of the ranks and knew the stuff inside out. And I was never going to be able to position myself in that way alongside those other managers. However, what I was able to say was that I had extensive background in valuation, case making, turning things that people think are completely intangible and qualitative and impossible to put a figure on. I was capable of being able to put a figure on those. So now my experience actually in a different team starts to become a real value add. And that's how I positioned it, as well as a couple of other things. For example, the fact that I had real extensive knowledge of what it was like to work in certain functions of the business, who that CSR team were trying to serve. So I could really offer that critical perspective when they were developing initiatives and things like that. So that was a way of positioning myself as actually a real value add, not having to take a demotion and also being able to get a pay rise. So think about that when you're making the case, because I think it's very easy for us to talk ourselves down and say, actually, if I'm going to make such a shift and I'm going to not have the content and technical expertise in that other team, then I need to be in some way sort of taking a hit for that. There are ways to position it, and I would love to work with you on that. So do reach out to me if that's something that you're thinking about. There are ways to position it which can really flip that. Okay, the final thing that I wanted to mention is that these kind of internal lateral moves are great for the business, and they're great for your existing team that you're leaving, and they're great for the new team, right? It really is a win-win. Even though for your current team, they may feel like they would just want to hang on to you and they'll put up some resistance. In the longer term, they're going to have an advocate in another part of the business who totally understands the way they do things and that will help engineer outcomes and create products and do things in a way that really takes your existing team into account, right? So you have advocates across the business. Likewise, in your new team, you're going to have somebody coming in who's got deep understanding of what it's like to operate in other parts of the business and can really bring those relationships in. So one of the things that they really valued about what I could bring at that point was that I was then able to provide much closer access to some of the partners and people from my departments that they would have loved to be interacting with and having sponsorship from. So that's another example of how it really benefits both teams, even if in the short term it might feel like it is not beneficial to the team that is going to lose you, in inverted commas. And of course, it's so much better than losing the individual to the wider, in terms of the wider organization as well. So you staying inside the organization is a real win. So it's brilliant for cross-functional relationships because I know that this is something that organizations want, because when I get coaching requests, building cross-functional relationships is often there. This is one of those direct ways that you get to do that by transplanting yourself from one team to another, having the strength of relationships back in your home team and really cultivating those. I remember being asked when I was interviewing for this transition, what's going to happen to your existing projects, right? The way you're describing this project and you're explaining how involved you are in it, how is it going to survive without you? And that did sort of put me on the spot for a minute. But actually what I realized is I'd been creating systems the whole way. I'd been making sure that the work and the project was really well managed. And so handover was going to be systemized and everything had been documented, and I hadn't been doing that kind of do it all type of role. So I was able to very easily set up the right processes as I went along. And that's what I did. And that's how I demonstrated that I was going to not be shooting my existing team in the foot by leaving, because there is a slightly delicate thing to manage there. So we have talked about how lateral moves, and when I say lateral moves, I do mean internal lateral moves in this conversation. Lateral moves can benefit your career in service of your life work vision. They can add huge amounts of value to the new team, which can be reflected in a pay rise. And we've talked about how it benefits your current team, the new team, and the organization as a whole. I hope that if you're encountering any resistance or doubt as you think through that type of move, this might have allowed you a bit of a perspective shift in what's possible. And of course, if that sort of thing is of interest to you, definitely go and revisit my masterclass. Drop me a note on LinkedIn or Instagram and I can register, and we can get you registered so that you can watch the replay. All right. Thank you for listening. And I will be back with you answering another question or picking another short topic next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Life Work with Maya. If you've got to this point, I'm guessing you found it valuable. So do share the link with somebody else who can benefit. In an age of materialism and us trying to stay on top of clutter, what could be nicer than to send a non-clutter digital link to somebody and say, I listened to this and I thought you might love it. What a great way to show your care and consideration for them. If you haven't left a review, now is the time, and make sure that you are subscribed on Spotify or you're following along on Apple Podcasts. And if you really want to help the show grow, then do share the link on IG stories, Instagram stories, or reshare or discuss your thoughts with my LinkedIn posts. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Do feel free to send me messages there. I love having dialogue with my listeners, and the links to those handles are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.